The records of the 1984 neurological study known as Project Deep Sleep remained classified for over 40 years because the results defied every known law of biology. It began in a windowless concrete facility in Nevada where Subject 402, a former drifter with no family, was subjected to a continuous stream of low-frequency sound waves designed to bypass the REM cycle. The goal was to see if human consciousness could exist in a permanent state of deep wakefulness without the need for the restorative properties of sleep. By the fifth day, the subject stopped blinking, his eyes fixed on a corner of the ceiling that was completely empty. When the lead researcher asked what he was looking at, the subject replied that he was watching the static peel away from the walls. By the 10th day, the subject's brain waves began to broadcast a signal that matched no known human pattern. It was as if his mind was tuning into a different radio frequency entirely. The horror intensified on the 14th night when the subject's physical body began to fail. Yet his mind stayed hyperactive. He sat perfectly still for 18 hours, whispering names of people the staff had never mentioned, names of the researchers' deceased relatives, and private secrets they had never told anyone. He claimed that when we sleep, we act as a filter for things that live in the shadows of our reality, and by staying awake, he had broken that filter. The final video log shows the subject looking directly into the camera lens with a wide, bloodless grin, his voice sounding like two people speaking at once. He told the doctors that he wasn't trapped in the room with them, but rather, they were trapped in the dream he was finally creating. When the lab lights flickered and died for exactly 3 seconds, the room was found empty upon their return. There were no signs of a struggle, and the heavy steel door was still locked from the outside. To this day, people participating in sleep studies across America report seeing a tall, pale figure in the corner of their vision, a man who never blinks, waiting for the moment they finally close their eyes to let him back in. Deep within the Appalachian Mountains, there is a rule that every local knows but no tourist ever respects. If you hear a whistle in the woods, no, you didn't. This story follows a group of hikers who set up camp near a jagged ridge far off the marked trail, seeking the raw beauty of the American wilderness. As the sun dipped below the tree line, casting long, distorted shadows across the forest floor, a high-pitched, melodic whistle echoed through the pines. It sounded almost human, yet it held a resonance that felt too large for a pair of lungs to produce. One of the hikers, thinking it was a park ranger or another group, whistled back a playful tune. The forest went deathly silent. Not a cricket chirped, and even the wind seemed to hold its breath as the temperature dropped 20 degrees in an instant. The whistling started again, but this time it was coming from 3 different directions, circling the camp with impossible speed. Each whistle was a perfect mimic of the hiker's own tune, but twisted into a minor key that made their skin crawl. They huddled inside their tent, clutching flashlights that seemed to dim whenever the sound drew closer. Outside, something heavy began to pace around the thin nylon walls, its footsteps light and rhythmic like a dancer's. When they finally gathered the courage to shine a light through the mesh, they saw nothing but the trees, yet the whistling was now coming from directly above them. A voice, sounding exactly like the hiker who had whistled back, whispered through the fabric, "That was a beautiful song, let me show you mine." In the morning, the camp was found perfectly intact, but the hikers were gone, leaving behind only their boots lined up in a neat row pointing toward the deepest part of the cave system, where the wind still carries a tune that no human mouth should ever be able to sing. The American suburbs are filled with houses that look identical, but 112 Miller Lane held a secret behind its freshly painted white picket fence. When the Miller family moved in, they noticed a heavy iron door in the basement that wasn't on the original floor plan. The real estate agent laughed it off as an old cold storage room, but the youngest son, Toby, insisted he could hear the scratching every time he went down to do the laundry. He described it as the sound of long fingernails dragging against concrete, followed by a soft, rhythmic thumping like a slow heartbeat. His parents ignored him, blaming the old pipes and the overactive imagination of a child in a new environment. However, as the weeks passed, the scratching grew louder, turning into a frantic clawing that seemed to shake the floorboards of the kitchen above. One rainy Tuesday, the scratching stopped and was replaced by a voice, a soft, feminine lilt that called Toby's name through the cracks in the iron door. It promised him toys and sweets, claiming it was his grandmother who had arrived early for a surprise visit. Driven by curiosity and the innocence of youth, Toby slid the heavy bolt across and pulled the door open. He found only a narrow, dark crawl space that smelled of damp earth and ancient dust. But as he turned to leave, a hand, impossibly long and pale with skin like wet parchment, reached out from the darkness and gently gripped his ankle. The basement lights flickered and hummed with a violent energy before exploding into shards of glass. When his parents ran downstairs, they found the iron door standing wide open, leading into a solid brick wall that had been there for 50 years. Toby was never seen again, but every new family that moves into 112 Miller Lane eventually finds a small, hand-drawn picture of a boy under the basement stairs, his eyes scratched out, with a caption that reads, "It's your turn to open the door."